Mr. Speaker.
Simon O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a real pleasure to stand in this debate. I thought I'd just touch on a quick few points of retort to the earlier speaker. I think actually National is and remains very proud of its working and track record with Māori, and I want to acknowledge the work of the Māori caucus. In fact, I have two of my colleagues, the Honourable Tau Henare and Claudette Hauiti, beside me as I talk tonight. Also, and Hekia Parata, Minister Parata down the front. Also want to acknowledge, of course, the great work that the Māori Party does. And it's interesting, they were talking around, how little money was invested. That's not quite true when you begin to look at all the work that's going around things like the business growth agenda. Of course, we have the treaty settlements that are ongoing and things like whānau ora that have been done. So I think it's important to acknowledge that. The only other thing I wanted to note was also from an earlier speaker who was getting all very upset that the National Party might be having a rejuvenation in its ranks. And it's funny when you look to the other side, for there are some people who have been on the Labour Party side for so long that they weren't there, Mr. Speaker, when my predecessor in Tamaki sat in this House. They weren't even there when my predecessor's predecessor sat in the House. In fact, it's my predecessor's predecessor's predecessor was in this House when a number of the Labour Party were there. So we are not afraid to have rejuvenated. Mr. Speaker, not at all, no. In fact, Tamaki has a very slow turnover, which I'm quite happy about. Mr. Speaker, last week, two budgets were delivered in the South Pacific, one on either side of the Tasman Sea. The Australian budget was one of enforced restraint, of hard choices, sharp realities and deep cutbacks. The other, delivered here by Minister Bill English, was measured and thoughtful. It was responsible and, best of all, it was balanced. What would Charles Dickens have said of this tale of two budgets? I think he would have said it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the age and spring of hope, and it was the winter of despair. Australia is now suffering through a winter of despair as its expenses come in. The new government in Australia is working hard to dig itself out of a financial quagmire it inherited from a Labour government, and something we on these national benches can sympathise with. But what lessons can New Zealand learn from this awful spectacle? For those of us on this side of the House, it reinforces that nothing comes for free. No matter what Labour and the Greens tell you, everything must be paid for eventually. New Zealanders know this. They can see what's happening to our closest neighbour, and they don't want it to happen here. They know that Labour and the Greens offer a short-term gain for a lot of long-term pain. In Australia, the left spent recklessly for years, buying favour with anyone they could. And you've heard similar from speakers of the left tonight. They're wanting to buy more and more favours. Their credit cards ran red hot and cash flowed like water. But of course, eventually the desires outstripped their resources and it all came crashing down. And we look to Australia, judging by the hangover they have now, it must have been quite a party. Yet Labour and the Greens here in New Zealand seem completely unaware of the mess their comrades made next door. Their solution to every problem, their answer to any question, is to spend more money. Raise wages with a magic wand, raise money from someone else. Labour is your magic genie, Mr. Speaker. If you have a wish, they'll make it come true. Just don't read the fine print. And well, there is a lot of fine print when you begin to consider the Labour Greens agenda. And what are these little gems? We've heard a lot tonight about Kiwi Build from the Labour Party, 100,000 houses they're going to build. If you add up all the costs of that, if it's meant to be under 400,000 each, something like $40 billion in total. Just a quarter of the nation's GDP, just like that, is going to be built somehow. And as has rightly been pointed out by colleagues on this side of the House, this government is already well onto its target of opening up 39,000 sections. We're about action, not talk. We hear about Kiwi Start. We heard from the Labour Party, again, who are not looking at the fine print. This was a money for all children, but actually not for all children when you start to read the fine print. The Labour Greens grouping want a capital gains tax to fund their spending. But that won't make money for years, if at all, and filled with so many caveats and regulations that it would be almost impossible to put together. And in more recent days, a shockingly, effectively racist plan to block thousands, tens of thousands of migrants to this country, but then again, perhaps not when you talk to another member of the party. And then, of course, they're all about the internet, access to all, but they're happy to ban Facebook, And my favourite element of the fine print, the Labour Party's vaunted commitment to equality for all, except, of course, for the on-again, off-again man ban. So Labour will go to the election in September with many marvellous promises and enough fine print to blind a barn owl. But contrast that, Mr. Speaker, contrast that duplicity with the common-sense policy National is offering New Zealand. We, and you've seen it in the budget, Mr. Speaker, are responsibly managing this economy. 2 to 4% economic growth, a budget surplus. I noted before the budget was delivered. It was something we were promising and have delivered. $1 billion of new spend in 2014 and $1.5 billion of new spend in 2015. Prudent, responsible, balanced approach. We're going to be peaking government debt at just over 26%, but looking to bring that down to that responsible 20%. A government that knows about balancing its debt commitments and down its expenses there. And also, absolutely, the things that we were keen, as my colleagues know, things like working for families, we chose to keep them to support that middle to low income. We decided to keep things like interest-free student loans. We kept the support. We've increased the welfare spend and support, and we are quite prepared to do that. Mr. Speaker, we're looking to cut ACC levies. We've heard tremendous news today and in the budget about, and all of a sudden, yes, my colleague Judith Collins in the House, we are reducing. Kiwis are going to find, as they go to re-register their vehicles, if that's even a correct word, to register their vehicles once again, are going to be getting substantial discounts. This is a government of financial prudence. We're a government also investing in education. Have a note here, $858 million of new spending over 4 years. $858 million. Much of this is to improve school property, in fact about $284 million of that to improve school property, more money for early childhood education, and a $2.5 million boost for things like home computing and so on. And this is making a real and substantial impact in my electorate, the great electorate of Tamaki. We've seen recently $3 million invested into the St Thomas's School for its new buildings. If you've never visited there, Mr. Speaker, it's well worth it. Not only is it a fantastic school, but one of the best outlooks of the country over the Waitemata. We have, of course, the ultra-fast broadband being rolled out, and I think of something like Glendowie College, a real innovator in this area who have been recently connected and looking forward to the network for learning. And then, of course, we have the wonderful college, Selwyn College. They are currently a finalist in the PM's Awards for Educational Excellence. And through the great work of the school and its principal, its teachers, its parents, its board of trustees, but I'd like to thank too the wider community and the government, they have seen their pass rates increase substantially. Selwyn College has seen its level 1 pass rate rise from 39 to 93% in just 7 years. What a fantastic turnaround that is in education. And of course, Mr. Speaker, we're doing amazing work supporting and helping children and families. That's something my electorate welcomes. The different constituents that have rung, emailed, Facebook, tweeted or turned up at the front door have really supported that $500 million to go to support families and children. And so, Mr. Speaker, here in this House, we have the best and the worst of times. A government of wisdom and an opposition of foolishness, ministers of prudence and profligate pretenders, great policies and reckless promises. The contrast couldn't be clearer, and I look forward to the National Government implementing this budget and retaining the Treasury benches.
I understand the next call is a split call. 5 minutes, Catherine Delahunty.
Tēnā koe, Mr. Speaker, tēnā koutou te whare.